10 years of dedication, only to be thrown out like trash. But they didn't know that what they saw as my weakness would become the blade to sever their million-dollar ambitions. I didn't just stand back up. I burned down the entire tower of prestige they once sat upon. They thought they were discarding a loyal employee. What they really did was create their own executioner. This is how I leaked their secrets and destroyed their $25 million deal. My name is Rachel Morgan, and until 3 hours ago, I was the director of communications at Brighton Dynamics, one of Denver's most prestigious tech companies, 34 years old, 10 years with the company. And it all ended in a sterile conference room that smelled like leather and broken promises. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I sat across from Derek Vaughn, our CEO, and Melissa from HR. Derek's Armani suit looked as crisp as ever, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled. He didn't even have the decency to look uncomfortable as he slid the termination papers across the mahogany table. "Rachel, you know we value everything you've done for Brighton," he began, his voice carrying that practiced corporate sympathy that meant nothing. "But with the current restructuring and budget constraints, we have to make some difficult decisions." Budget constraints? I almost laughed. Just last week, I'd seen the invoice for his new Tesla Model S Plaid company car. Of course. 10 years, Derek, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I built your entire communications department from scratch. I was here when we had 12 employees. I wrote every press release that got us from a garage startup to a $100 million valuation. Melissa shifted uncomfortably, adjusting her glasses. She'd been hired 6 months ago, probably specifically for moments like this. Clean hands for dirty work. "We understand this is difficult," she interjected, reading from her script. "We're prepared to offer you 2 weeks severance and..." 2 weeks? The words came out sharp enough to cut. That's it? 2 weeks for a decade? Derek's jaw tightened slightly, the only sign he was human under that executive veneer. "Given the circumstances, we feel it's fair." The circumstances? I knew exactly what the circumstances were. Last month, Derek's niece Alexandra had joined the team as a communications coordinator. Fresh out of college, zero experience. But suddenly she was sitting in on executive meetings while I was being pushed out of rooms I'd earned my place in. "Is Alexandra taking my position?" I asked directly. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Derek's eyes hardened. "The restructuring involves several role changes. We can't discuss other employees' positions." I signed where they told me to sign. What else could I do? Security would escort me out if I refused. Tom from IT was already standing outside, ready to collect my badge and laptop. Except they'd forgotten I still had my work laptop at home, the one I'd been using for remote work every Friday. The walk to my office, former office, felt like a funeral march. Colleagues averted their eyes as I passed. Some looked sympathetic, others seemed relieved it wasn't them. Hannah from accounting mouthed, "I'm sorry," from her cubicle. She'd probably known before I did. The finance department always knows first. I packed 10 years into a cardboard box. The industry awards we'd won, the framed photo from our IPO announcement, the coffee mug that said, "World's okayest boss," a Secret Santa gift from my team last year. My team that I wouldn't be leading anymore. Tom walked me to the elevator, his hand hovering near my elbow like I might bolt with company secrets. If only he knew what secrets were actually hiding in plain sight. The December air hit me like a slap when I stepped outside. Denver's downtown was bustling with lunch-hour traffic. People hurrying past in their winter coats, absorbed in their normal Tuesday afternoon. My Tuesday had just shattered into pieces. I stood on the sidewalk, holding my pathetic box of memories, the termination letter crushing in my coat pocket. The Brighton Dynamics building loomed behind me, its glass facade reflecting the gray winter sky. Through the windows, I could see the conference room where my career had just died. Derek was probably already in there with someone else, destroying another life with the same practiced efficiency. My phone buzzed, a text from my sister. "How's your day going?" I almost threw the phone into traffic. Instead, I typed back, Career just ended. Tell you later. The cold was starting to seep through my coat, but I couldn't move. 10 years, 3,650 days. Countless nights when I'd chosen PowerPoints over people, deadlines over dates, this company over my own life. My hands were shaking now, from cold or rage or both. The termination letter crinkled in my pocket as my fist clenched around it. They thought they were just removing an inconvenient employee, clearing the way for nepotism to flourish. They had no idea what they'd just unleashed. The wine glass shattered against my apartment wall, leaving a crimson stain that looked like blood. 3 bottles in, and I still couldn't drown out the last decade of my life. It started as an internship. 24 years old, fresh out of Northwestern with a communications degree and dreams bigger than my studio apartment could hold. Brighton Dynamics was just 15 people then, working out of a converted warehouse in Reno. Derek had seemed different back then. Hungry, innovative, almost human. I remembered my first day, nervous in my Ross dress for less blazer, trying to look like I belonged. "You're going to help us change the world," Derek had said, shaking my hand with that $1,000,000 smile. And God help me. I believed him. The memories came in waves, each one cutting deeper than the last. Year 2. My first major win. I'd secured coverage in TechCrunch for our Series A funding. Derek had actually hugged me, called me the secret weapon. I'd worked 70-hour weeks for months, living on takeout and ambition. My boyfriend at the time, Marcus, had tried to be understanding. "It's just temporary, right?" he'd asked. Once things settled down, things never settled down. Year 4. The night before our product launch, I'd been at the office until 4 a.m., crafting press releases, coordinating with journalists across time zones. My sister Emma was getting married that weekend in Phoenix. I'd promised I'd be there. Promised I'd give the maid of honor speech I'd been writing for months. Instead, I'd stood in that empty office, phone pressed to my ear, listening to Emma try not to cry. "It's okay, Rach, I understand. The company needs you." The company needed me. But Emma needed her sister. And I chose Brighton Dynamics. Year 6. Marcus was gone by then. He'd left a note that said everything and nothing. "I can't compete with a job. I won't try anymore." I'd cried for exactly 1 hour, then buried myself in preparing for our IPO announcement. Derek had promoted me to director, a title that felt like vindication for everything I'd sacrificed. Year 8. Mom's cancer diagnosis. I'd managed to make it to some of her chemo appointments, laptop always in tow, answering emails while poison dripped into her veins. She'd squeezed my hand once and said, "Sweetheart, don't let them steal your whole life." But they already had. I thought about all the team members I'd mentored, the ones who'd moved on to better opportunities while I stayed, loyal as a beaten dog. Jennifer, who'd started as my assistant, was now VP of Marketing at a Fortune 500 company. She'd sent me a message last month. "You taught me everything, but the most important lesson was watching you. I learned to never give a company more than it gives you." I hadn't understood what she meant, not until today. The worst part was how gradual it had been. Derek's transformation from visionary leader to corporate tyrant. The shifts in company culture. The way my ideas started being presented in meetings by other people. Always men, always with connections I didn't have. The way my voice got quieter in rooms where it used to ring the loudest. 6 months ago, when Alexandra appeared, I should have seen it coming. Derek's niece, with her UCLA degree and Instagram perfect smile, shadowing me in meetings, asking questions that weren't really questions. Why do we do it this way? Wouldn't it be more efficient if, always in front of Derek, always making me look stuck in old patterns? I'd trained my replacement without realizing it. Taught her every strategy, every contact, every secret to managing Derek's ego and the board's expectations. I'd handed them the rope they'd hang me with. The apartment felt suffocating now. Pictures on the wall mocked me, company retreats, team celebrations, award ceremonies, in every photo. I stood near Derek, his trusted lieutenant, his fool. There was one from last year's Christmas party. I was laughing at something he'd said. wearing the dress I'd bought specifically for that event because I didn't have time to shop for anything else. I pulled it off the wall, ready to smash it too, when I saw something in my own eyes in that photo. Even then, even laughing, there was an emptiness, a hollowness that came from giving everything and keeping nothing for yourself. My phone had been buzzing steadily. Texts from former colleagues who'd heard the news, LinkedIn notifications from recruiters who smelled blood in the water, Emma calling repeatedly, probably worried I'd do something stupid. But I wasn't sad anymore. The wine had burned through that, leaving something sharper, cleaner. Rage. Pure, crystallized rage at the decade I'd never get back. At the relationships I'd sacrificed on the altar of corporate loyalty. At the version of myself I'd murdered slowly. Email by email, meeting by meeting, until I didn't recognize the woman in the mirror anymore. They'd taken everything I'd given freely, then discarded me like obsolete software. I opened my laptop, the personal one, and stared at the screen. Somewhere in my email, I still had the passwords, the access codes, the foolish trust of a company that had forgotten I'd built their entire digital infrastructure. They thought they'd fired Rachel Morgan, the devoted director of communications. They had no idea they'd just created something else entirely. The laptop sat on my coffee table like a loaded gun. My work laptop, the one they'd forgotten to collect because it was at my apartment for remote Fridays. Tom from IT had probably realized his mistake by now, but it was after hours. They'd likely send someone tomorrow, maybe even change the passwords tonight. But right now, at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, I still had access. I shouldn't look. I knew I shouldn't look. My finger hovered over the trackpad. Just my own emails, I told myself. Just downloading my personal files, the work I'd created. That was legal, wasn't it? My intellectual property? The familiar Brighton Dynamics login screen appeared. My credentials still worked. Of course they did. I'd set up most of these systems myself back when we were too small for a proper IT department. First, my email. Thousands of messages, 10 years of digital life. I started downloading my sent folder, watching the progress bar crawl forward. Then, because I was already there, I clicked on Derek's shared calendar, old habit from years of managing his schedule. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., strategic planning, Q1 federal contract. Federal contract? We didn't have any federal contracts in the pipeline, at least, none that I knew about. And I would have known. I handled all our government communications. Curiosity is a dangerous thing at 10 p.m. with 3 bottles of wine and a decade of rage in your system. I navigated to the shared drive, to the executive folder I still had access to. Sloppy. They were so sloppy. But why wouldn't they be? Good. Loyal Rachel would never. The folder was labeled Project Potomac. Inside, dozens of documents dated from the last 3 months. While I'd been training Alexandra, while I'd been slowly being pushed out, they'd been working on something massive without me. I opened the first document, then the second, then I couldn't stop. My hands started shaking, but not from alcohol this time. It was all there, email threads between Derek and several board members, documentation for a $25 million federal contract with the Department of Defense for our AI-powered surveillance software. The contract that would make Brighton Dynamics a major player. That would triple our valuation overnight. But that wasn't what made my blood run cold. The emails showed everything. Derek discussing financial incentives for Procurement Officer James Hoffman. Falsified test results showing our software's accuracy rate at 97% when internal docs showed it barely hit 71%. Backdated compliance certificates. A web of lies designed to secure the contract at any cost. We need to ensure Hoffman is properly motivated, Derek had written. The $500K consultation fee should be routed through the Phoenix subsidiary. Bribery, federal fraud, enough to destroy everything. I kept reading, downloading everything to my personal drive. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't just corporate malfeasance, this was criminal. Federal criminal. Another email thread caught my eye, dated 2 months ago. We need to remove Rachel before Potomac closes. She's too principled, too connected to the press. Can't risk her asking questions. Make it look like restructuring. There it was. My termination hadn't been about Alexandra, or nepotism, or budget cuts. It had been about silencing me before I could discover this. They'd fired me because I was the only person in that building with enough integrity to stop them. My phone rang, startling me. Derek's name on the screen. At 11:24 p.m., I let it go to voicemail, my hands trembling as I continued downloading files. Contract drafts, financial records, correspondence with Hoffman. Each document another nail in Brighton Dynamics' coffin. The phone rang again. This time it was Tom from IT. They knew. Somehow, they knew I was in the system. I worked faster, grabbing everything I could. The main contract proposal, the real testing data, the email threads discussing the bribery. My laptop fanned word as it processed gigabytes of evidence. A text from Derek. Rachel, we need to talk. I know you're upset, but accessing company files after termination is a crime. Call me. We can work something out. Work something out. Like they'd worked out my firing to cover up their federal fraud? Another text. I'm sending someone to collect the laptop. Be reasonable, Rachel. You don't want to make this worse. Worse? They'd destroyed my career to protect their criminal enterprise. They'd stolen 10 years of my life and then thrown me away to secure their blood money. How could it possibly get worse? The download finished. 4.7 GB of evidence sitting on my personal hard drive. I ejected it, my hands steady now, the wine forgotten. This wasn't drunk Rachel making bad decisions. This was clear, cold calculation. I pulled out my personal laptop and began encrypting the files, uploading them to multiple secure cloud services. If they thought they could intimidate me into silence, they'd gravely miscalculated. My doorbell rang, then loud knocking. Ms. Morgan, this is building security. Mr. Vaughn from your company is here. He says it's urgent. Derek was here, at my apartment, at midnight. He wasn't sending someone tomorrow to collect the laptop. He was here now, because he knew what I'd found. I closed the Brighton laptop, my mind racing. The evidence was secured. But what now? I could pretend I'd found nothing, hand over the laptop, go quietly into the night like they'd planned. Or I could burn it all down. More knocking. Rachel, please. Let's discuss this like adults. You don't understand the full picture. Oh, but I did. For the first time in 10 years, I understood everything. I looked at the laptop, then at my phone, where I had the contact information for every major tech journalist in the country. Contacts I'd cultivated over a decade. Contacts who trusted me. They'd fired the wrong person. They'd created their own worst nightmare. And I was just getting started. I sat in the dark. Derek's muffled voice still coming through the door. The laptop glowed on my coffee table, and beside it, my phone with 3 missed calls from my sister and 17 texts from various Brighton employees. What was I doing? The initial rage was fading, replaced by something colder. Fear. Real. Bone-deep fear of what I was contemplating. If I released these documents, I wouldn't just be burning down Brighton Dynamics, I'd be destroying myself too. Whistleblowers don't get parades, they get lawsuits, they get blacklisted, they get their entire lives dissected by corporate lawyers who bill more per hour than I made in a week. Derek had stopped knocking, but I knew he was still there, waiting. I pulled up Google, typed whistleblower retaliation cases. The results were a horror show. People who'd lost everything, savings drained by legal fees, reputations destroyed, careers obliterated. One woman had exposed Medicare fraud and ended up living in her car. Another man who'd reported defense contractor corruption couldn't find work for 7 years. Was my rage worth that? Was my pride worth becoming unemployable, possibly criminal, definitely ruined? I thought about my apartment. Rent was $2,400 a month. My savings could cover maybe 6 months if I was careful. Then what? Move back with Mom. who was still recovering from chemo. Become another cautionary tale about crossing corporate America? My phone buzzed. Emma. Rachel, Derek Vaughn just called me. Me. What the hell is going on? He says you have company property and you're confused about your termination. Are you okay? He'd called my sister. The bastard had actually called my family. Another text, this one from Marcus. Marcus, who I hadn't heard from in 2 years. Hey, your old boss just reached out to me on LinkedIn asking if I'd heard from you. Really weird. You all right? They were mapping my entire network, everyone I might turn to. The message was clear. We know everyone you know. We can reach anyone you might run to. I stood up, paced to the window. Denver spread out below, lights twinkling like false promises. Somewhere in this city, James Hoffman was probably sleeping soundly, $500,000 richer. Derek would go home to his Cherry Hills mansion, confident he'd contained the problem of Rachel Morgan. But then I thought about the others, the ones who'd come after me. How many more Rachels would there be? How many more people would pour their souls into Brighton Dynamics, only to be discarded when convenient? How many more Alexandras would get positions they hadn't earned while qualified people were shown the door? And that software, God, that software. 71% accuracy rate for surveillance technology being sold to the Department of Defense. That meant 29% of the time, it would be wrong. Wrong about identifying threats, wrong about marking civilians as targets, wrong in ways that could cost lives. I pulled up the email again, the one where Derek had written about removing me because I was too principled. Too principled, in their world, having principles was a liability, a weakness to be eliminated. My laptop pinged. A new email in my personal account. From Derek. Rachel, I know you're reading this. I'm going to be straight with you. You have 2 choices. Option 1, return the laptop tonight, sign an enhanced NDA, and receive 6 months severance plus health insurance. We'll also provide a glowing recommendation for your next role. Option 2, keep digging into matters you don't understand and face legal action that will drain every penny you have and ensure you never work in this industry again. We have resources you can't imagine. We will bury you. You have 1 hour to decide. This isn't personal. Rachel. It's business. Be smart. Derek. I read it 3 times. The threat was crystal clear, wrapped in corporate speak but unmistakable. Sign away my right to speak or be destroyed. But there was something else in that email. Fear. Derek was afraid, if I truly had nothing. If I was just a disgruntled ex-employee with no ammunition, he wouldn't be at my door at midnight. He wouldn't be offering 6 months severance. He wouldn't be threatening me. He was afraid because he knew what I'd found could destroy him. I thought about Mom, weak from chemo, telling me not to let them steal my whole life. But they already had, hadn't they? 10 years, gone. And if I took Derek's deal, if I signed that NDA and walked away, wouldn't I be letting them steal my integrity too? The last piece of myself I had left? The phone rang. An unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Ms. Morgan? A woman's voice, professional but warm. My name is Sandra Liu. I'm an attorney specializing in whistleblower protection. I received a call from a mutual friend, Jennifer Walsh. She thought you might need legal advice tonight. Jennifer, my former assistant, now VP at a Fortune 500. She'd somehow known, somehow guessed what was happening. I can't afford an attorney, I said flatly. Whistleblower cases are often taken on contingency. Ms. Morgan. If what you have is what Jennifer suspects, you wouldn't pay unless we win. And the False Claims Act provides for significant compensation for whistleblowers who expose fraud against the government. We're talking potentially millions, or total destruction. Those were my choices. Derek Vaughn is outside my door right now, I said. Don't let him in. Don't sign anything. And whatever you do, preserve all evidence. Can you meet me at my office in an hour? I looked at the laptop, at my phone, at the door where Derek probably still waited. Yes, I heard myself say. Yes, I can. The decision was made. Not in rage, not in wine-soaked anger, but in cold clarity. They'd taken 10 years of my life. They'd fired me to cover their crimes. They'd threatened everyone I cared about. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd left me with nothing left to lose. Sandra Liu's office smelled like leather and justice. 23rd floor of the Wells Fargo Center, views of the entire city, and the kind of silence that only money could buy. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes that had probably seen every corporate scandal Denver had to offer. "Show me what you have," she said simply. For the next 2 hours, we went through everything, every email, every falsified document, every trail of money leading to James Hoffman. Sandra took notes on a legal pad, her expression never changing. But I saw her pupils dilate when we got to the test results. 71% accuracy sold as 97%. "This is significant," she said finally. "The False Claims Act allows for treble damages. If that contract is $25 million, the government could recover $75 million. Your share would be 15 to 30%. The math was staggering, but the risk? "Derek will destroy me," I said. "He has connections everywhere." "Derek is about to have bigger problems than you," Sandra replied. "But you're right. This will get ugly. You need to be prepared for that." Over the next 3 weeks, I became a ghost. Sandra had me stay with her sister outside Boulder while we built the case. I spent 18-hour days organizing evidence, creating timelines, preparing affidavits. Every document had to be verified. Every claim substantiated. The paranoia was constant. Every car that drove by too slowly. Every unknown number that called. Every LinkedIn view from an anonymous profile sent my heart racing. I changed my passwords daily, used only encrypted communications, even bought burner phones like I was in some spy movie. But I wasn't alone. Jennifer connected me with 3 former Brighton employees who'd seen pieces of the puzzle. Sandra brought in a forensic accountant who traced the Phoenix subsidiary payments. Even Hannah from accounting. Brave Hannah. Secretly copied financial records that corroborated the bribery. The hardest part was the silence. Emma texted daily, worried sick. Mom left voicemails asking if I was okay. I couldn't tell them anything, couldn't risk Derek's lawyers claiming I'd leaked information. Meanwhile, Brighton Dynamics was moving forward. I monitored their press releases from my laptop. The federal contract was set to be announced in 2 weeks. Derek had even scheduled a company-wide celebration. Alexandra, my replacement, was quoted in TechCrunch about Brighton's exciting new government partnerships. Then Sandra found something that changed everything. "The surveillance software," she said, sliding a document across her desk. "It's been deployed in a pilot program in Minneapolis." My blood went cold. "It's already in use?" "3 months now." And look at this. Another document. Police reports. False positives. 3 wrongful arrests based on the software's misidentification. One was a teenager, held for 48 hours because the system flagged him as a terror suspect. He'd been walking to school. "They knew," I whispered. "They knew it didn't work. And they let people get arrested anyway." "This isn't just fraud anymore," Sandra said. "This is criminal negligence, civil rights violations. This is prison time." That night, I made my decision. Not just to file the whistleblower complaint, but to go further. To ensure they couldn't bury this in legal proceedings that would take years. I called Michael Stevenson at the Denver Post, then Jennifer's contact at the Washington Post, then that blogger at TechCrunch who'd always been skeptical of Brighton's rapid rise. "I have a story," I told each of them. "But you need to move fast. 2 weeks fast." Sandra nearly had a heart attack when I told her. "Rachel, this could compromise the legal case. Or it could ensure Derek can't buy his way out," I countered. "If the public knows, if the DOD is embarrassed publicly, they can't sweep this under the rug." She stared at me for a long moment. "You're not the same woman who walked into my office 3 weeks ago." She was right. That woman had been scared, uncertain, worried about her future. This woman had already lost everything that mattered. This woman had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. I spent the next week working with the journalists, providing documents, confirming facts, ensuring they had everything they needed. Each outlet agreed to embargo the story until the same day, the day before Brighton's federal contract announcement, the night before the stories would break. I couldn't sleep. I sat in Sandra's sister's guest room, staring at my laptop screen. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, Derek's empire would begin to crumble. Tomorrow, those wrongfully arrested in Minneapolis would have answers. But tomorrow, I'd also become a target. Every mistake I'd ever made would be scrutinized. Every enemy I'd accumulated would come forward. Every bridge would burn. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Last chance, Rachel. Walk away now. And we'll make it worth your while. Continue. And we'll make sure you regret it for the rest of your life. D. I deleted the message. Then I opened my laptop and sent one final email to Sandra. File the complaint first thing tomorrow morning. Let's burn it all down. At 3 a.m., I finally fell asleep. For the first time in 3 weeks, maybe 3 years, I slept peacefully. They thought they'd fired a communications director. Tomorrow, they'd learned they'd created a whistleblower. And whistleblowers, I'd learned, had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The coffee shop was empty at 5 a.m., just me and my laptop, watching the world end in real time. 6 a.m., the Washington Post story went live. Defense contractor Brighton Dynamics accused of $25 million fraud, bribery scheme. 6:07 a.m., the Denver Post followed. Local tech giant falsified AI accuracy rates, whistleblower claims. 6:15 a.m., TechCrunch's headline was brutal. The startup that lied its way to a defense contract. My phone exploded. Journalists, former colleagues, numbers I didn't recognize. I turned it off, focused on the screen. The stories were meticulous, damning. Everything Sandra and I had provided, laid out in black and white. By 7 a.m., it was trending on Twitter. Brighton scandal. Someone had already made memes. Derek's corporate headshot next to a prisoner number. It shouldn't have felt satisfying, but it did. 8 a.m. Brighton's stock price opened down 30%. 8:30 a.m. The Department of Defense announced an immediate suspension of the contract pending investigation. 9 a.m. I watched from my laptop as local news vans surrounded Brighton's office building. Employees arriving for work looked confused, horrified, checking their phones as reporters swarmed. Then came Derek's response. A hastily arranged press conference at 10 a.m. I found a live stream, watched him stride to the podium in his perfect suit, jaw clenched. These allegations are completely baseless, he began, his voice steady but his eyes darting. This is nothing more than the vindictive actions of a disgruntled former employee who was terminated for performance issues. Performance issues, after 10 years of stellar reviews. We stand behind our technology and our ethical business practices. We will cooperate fully with any investigation, confident we'll be vindicated. But the reporters smelled blood. Mr. Vaughn, how do you explain the emails showing direct communication with James Hoffman about payment? Can you comment on the Minneapolis arrests based on false positives? Is it true the whistleblower is Rachel Morgan, your former communications director? He walked off without answering. The great Derek Vaughn, running from questions. My phone, still off, sat beside me like a dead thing. I knew it contained dozens of messages from Mom, from Emma, from everyone who'd just learned what I'd done, but I couldn't face them yet. By noon, the story had gone national. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, everyone was covering it. Major defense contractor scandal. AI technology fail. Whistleblower exposes corruption. At 2 p.m., Sandra called on the burner phone. The FBI just contacted me. They want to meet with you tomorrow. The FBI, this was real. This was happening. Also, she continued, Brighton's board just announced an emergency meeting. My source says they're discussing Derek's immediate termination. Around 3 p.m., I finally turned on my regular phone. 147 missed calls, over 300 texts. The first one I read was from Hannah. You brave, beautiful badass. Thank you. Then from Jennifer. Watching Derek squirm on live TV. You did it, Rachel. You actually did it. But not all were supportive. Former colleagues who still had jobs were terrified, angry. You've destroyed the company. We're all going to lose our jobs because of you. I have kids to feed. How could you? How could I? How could I not? The Minneapolis teenager's family had already announced they were suing Brighton Dynamics. The ACLU was getting involved. What had been a corporate fraud case was becoming a civil rights scandal. At 4 p.m., something unexpected happened. Alexandra, Derek's niece, my replacement, posted on LinkedIn. I was brought into Brighton Dynamics through nepotism. I wasn't qualified for the role I was given. Rachel Morgan trained me with patience and professionalism, even as she was being pushed out to make room for me. What she's exposed isn't just fraud, it's a pattern of corruption I was unknowingly part of. I'm resigning effective immediately and cooperating with investigators. Even Alexandra, even the one who'd benefited, was abandoning ship. By 5 p.m., the board announced Derek Vaughn was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. CFO Martin Walsh, also implicated in the emails, had been terminated. Trading of Brighton stock was halted after dropping 67%. I sat in that coffee shop until it closed, watching an empire crumble in real time. Every refresh brought new developments. Customers canceling contracts. Partners distancing themselves. Employees updating LinkedIn profiles, jumping ship. That night, in my temporary refuge, I finally called Mom. Rachel, honey, I saw the news. Are you okay? I don't know. I answered honestly. I did the right thing, didn't I? You stood up to powerful people doing terrible things. That's not just right, sweetheart. That's heroic. Heroic. I didn't feel heroic. I felt exhausted, terrified, exhilarated, and hollow all at once. Before bed, I checked the news one more time. The latest update: James Hoffman arrested on federal bribery charges. Then a text from a number I didn't recognize. Ms. Morgan, I'm the teenager wrongfully arrested in Minneapolis. Thank you. Because of you, my family has answers. Because of you, this won't happen to anyone else. I stared at that message for a long time. They'd fired me to keep me silent. Instead, they'd given me the loudest voice in tech news that day. Tomorrow would bring FBI interviews, legal procedures, probably threats, and certainly more anger from those affected. The war wasn't over, it had just begun. But tonight, for the first time in 10 years, I felt like myself again. The FBI field office in Denver felt like a hospital, sterile, fluorescent, and suffocating. Agent Sarah Martinez and Agent David Kim sat across from me, recording devices between us, Sandra at my side. Walk us through everything, Martinez said, from the beginning. 6 hours of testimony, evidence presentation, document verification. They wanted every detail, every date, every communication. By the end, my throat was raw. But the agent's expressions had shifted from skeptical to determined. This is one of the most comprehensive whistleblower packages we've received, Kim admitted. Your documentation is thorough. Over the next 2 weeks, Brighton Dynamics imploded in slow motion, and I had a front row seat. Day 3 after the story broke, the DoD announced a full audit of all Brighton contracts going back 5 years. Every government dollar was under scrutiny. Day 5. 3 more employees came forward with evidence of other fraudulent practices: Medicare billing irregularities, EPA violations, tax evasion. My revelation had opened the floodgates. Day 7. Derek Vaughn was arrested at his Cherry Hills mansion at 6 a.m. The footage of him in handcuffs, being led to an FBI vehicle, played on every news channel. His lawyer claimed complete innocence, but the evidence was overwhelming. Day 10, Brighton's board announced massive layoffs. 400 employees, people who'd done nothing wrong except trust the wrong company. The guilt ate at me. Their families, their mortgages, their kids' college funds, all collateral damage from my truth bomb. Hannah called me, crying. I don't blame you, Rachel. But I'm scared. We're all scared. I wanted to help. But what could I offer? I was radioactive. No company would touch me now. The whistleblower who destroyed a $100 million company wasn't exactly LinkedIn material. Day 14. The full scope emerged. The FBI revealed Brighton had been selling faulty software to police departments in 7 states. Dozens of wrongful arrests, hundreds of misidentified suspects. The Minnesota teenager was just the tip of the iceberg. Sandra called with updates daily. The government's recovered $47 million so far. Your share is looking at $714 million, depending on final settlements. Millions. But I couldn't touch it yet. Wouldn't see a penny for probably years while cases wound through courts. Week 3. I had to leave Sandra's sister's house. Reporters had found me. I moved to a hotel, then another, living out of a suitcase, existing in limbo. The threats started then. Emails from anonymous accounts. You destroyed good people's lives. Hope you're happy with blood on your hands. Watch your back. But there were other messages too. From a woman in St. Louis whose son had been wrongfully arrested by Brighton Software. From a former Brighton engineer who tried to raise concerns internally and been silenced. From employees at other companies inspired to speak up about their own corporate crimes. Week 4, Martin Walsh, the CFO, flipped. He agreed to testify against Derek in exchange for a reduced sentence. The house of cards was collapsing faster now. Then came the call I'd been dreading. Rachel. Derek's wife, Patricia. We'd had dinner together dozens of times. Their kids called me Aunt Rachel. Patricia, Our accounts are frozen, she said, voice hollow. The kids' college funds, everything. Did you think about them? Rachel? Did you think about the innocents? I had no answer that would satisfy her. Yes, I'd thought about them. But I'd thought more about that teenager in Minneapolis, about the thousands who might be falsely accused, about the integrity that matters more than comfort. I'm sorry, was all I could say. No, you're not, she replied, and hung up. Week 5. The congressional hearing was announced. The House Committee on Oversight wanted answers about how federal contracting had failed so spectacularly. They wanted me to testify. Public testimony, under oath, on C-SPAN. You don't have to do it, Sandra said. You've done enough. But I hadn't. Not yet. Week 6. Derek was denied bail, flight risk. The judge said. His empire officially ended when Brighton Dynamics filed for bankruptcy. The building I'd spent 10 years in would be sold. The desk where I'd worked countless late nights would be liquidated. A reporter from 60 Minutes reached out. Book agents called. Movie producers left voicemails. Everyone wanted to monetize my destruction, to package corporate catastrophe as entertainment. I turned them all down. This wasn't a story. This was my life, and the lives of everyone affected. Then, unexpectedly, a job offer. A small nonprofit in Washington focused on corporate accountability wanted me as their director of investigations. The salary was half what I'd made at Brighton, but it was work that mattered. We need someone who understands how these companies operate, they said. Someone who's been inside and isn't afraid to expose the truth. Week 8. The final tally was staggering. Brighton Dynamics dissolved. Derek Vaughn, facing 15 to 20 years in federal prison. Martin Walsh, 5 to 10 years. James Hoffman, 10 to 15 years. Hundreds of millions in damages to be paid to victims of false arrests. And me? Sitting in my hotel room, staring at a check from the first partial whistleblower payment, $2.3 million. It should have felt like victory, like vindication. Instead, it felt like the end of one life and the uncertain beginning of another. I'd destroyed the company that had destroyed me, But in the rubble, I had to figure out who Rachel Morgan was when she wasn't defined by revenge. The answer, I was learning, was someone who'd never again trade integrity for security. Someone who'd learned that speaking truth to power costs everything, but silence costs even more. The federal courthouse in Denver had never felt smaller than when Derek Vaughn stood for sentencing. 6 months after that first news story broke, and here we were, the final act. I sat in the gallery, 3 rows back. Not in the front where the prosecutors wanted me, not hidden in the back like I was ashamed. Just present, bearing witness to the end of everything. Derek looked different. The designer suits were gone, replaced by a basic gray suit that didn't quite fit. The perfect hair was growing out gray at the roots. But his eyes still held that cold calculation, even now. 18 years, the judge announced. For conspiracy to commit fraud, bribery of federal officials, and reckless endangerment through false representation of public safety technology. 18 years. Derek would be in his 70s when he got out. His empire, gone. His reputation, destroyed. His family, fractured. He turned as they led him away, our eyes meeting across the courtroom. No words, just a look that carried everything, his hatred, my resolution, and the strange understanding that we'd both played our parts to their inevitable conclusion. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. I'd gotten good at walking past them, at keeping my head up but my mouth shut. The story had been told. There was nothing left to say. That night, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment in Washington, D.C. It was smaller than my Denver place, but it was mine, bought with money that came from truth, not lies. The nonprofit job was hard, long hours investigating corporate malfeasance, building cases, protecting other whistleblowers. Some days, I felt like Sisyphus, pushing the boulder of corporate accountability up an endless mountain. But it was honest work, clean work. My phone buzzed. Emma, sending pictures from her daughter's first birthday, the niece I'd never met during my Brighton years because I'd been too busy. Can't wait to see you at Christmas, she wrote. Mom's doing great, by the way. Full remission. Small mercies. The life I'd lost was slowly being rebuilt, piece by piece. Then another message, from Hannah, who'd landed at a better company with my recommendation. Saw Derek's sentencing on the news. How do you feel? How did I feel? I thought about the last 3 years. The sacrifice of my 20s and half my 30s to a company that had valued profits over people, lies over truth. The midnight collapse when they discarded me, the terrifying decision to fight back. The months of fear, threats, and uncertainty. The strange hollow victory of millions of dollars that couldn't buy back lost time. But also, the teenager in Minneapolis who'd been cleared. The other victims who'd gotten justice. The company's now thinking twice before falsifying data because they'd seen what happened to Brighton. The other whistleblowers who'd reached out, saying my story gave them courage. Derek thought he'd fired an employee. He'd created something else, a reminder that power isn't permanent. That truth has a way of surfacing, that sometimes the people you step onto climb higher are the same ones who'll pull you down. I texted Hannah back, free. Because that's what I was. Free from the corporate culture that had consumed me. Free from the need for approval from people who didn't deserve my loyalty. Free from the person I'd been. That desperate, devoted fool who'd thought sacrifice meant success. The Washington Monument glowed in the distance, a reminder of the ideals this country claimed to stand for. Justice, truth, accountability. Big words that sometimes, just sometimes, meant something. I'd lost 10 years, but I'd gained something worth more than any salary or stock option. The knowledge that when it mattered, when everything was on the line, I'd chosen truth over comfort, integrity over security. They'd fired me after 10 years. I'd leaked their secrets and destroyed their $25 million deal. But more than that, I'd remembered who I was before Brighton Dynamics had tried to remake me in their image. My name is Rachel Morgan. I'm 37 years old. I'm a whistleblower, an investigator, a sister, a daughter, and I'm no longer afraid. The city lights twinkled below, each one a life, a story. Maybe another person sitting at a desk right now, working late for a company that didn't deserve them. To them, I had one piece of advice: know your worth, document everything, and never, ever let them make you forget that your integrity is worth more than their money. Because in the end, they can take your job, your security, your comfortable life, but they can only take your truth if you let them. And some of us, the dangerous ones, we never let them. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Rachel's position? I read every comment and would love to hear your perspective on corporate loyalty versus personal integrity.